Okay, well, welcome everybody. How am I? I'm going to share my screen and we'll just open with our usual Academy EX Karakia, which is this one. Many of you will know this already. Kotakawa Orunga, Kotakawa Oraro, Kotakawa Ora, Kotakawa Ora, E rongo whakaira hia ki runga, churuturu ofiti whakamaua ki tina,
Tina.
tina, huie,
We take.
taike. Okay, so this is the topic of tonight's session. AI is changing software. What does that mean for the rest of us? Wasn't actually my title. I'm not sure what my title was. Um, but we can we're going to talk through a lot of different things about what's happening with AI and software and what it means for everybody who isn't necessarily a developer, but is kind of
Hmm,
software adjacent, which is kind of really where this course has historically sat.
hmm.
But before we get into that, I'll we'll just introduce ourselves briefly. Oh, yes, we have a whakatuaki. E tipu e rea mona ra o toao. Grow and develop in the world that is destined to you, by Aparana Nata. Um, it's the first line of a rather long piece of writing that highlights the importance of being able to respond to new challenges in a new world, which I think we're all in. Not only is it a
Hmm.
new world, but it's a constantly changing world and changing
It's
very fast.
day by day.
Yes. I said to Roy that we should sort of put lots of things on our slides to make us look impressive. So I've trawled my long history to um, put a few things up here. So my name's David Parsons. I'm research director at Academy EX, which is the building that I'm standing in front of at this moment. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Canterbury. Um, I've been in computing for quite a long time. I did my master's and PhD in that space and worked in the UK in education in that area. And then I spent 5 years as a software consultant in various places. And then when I came to New Zealand, I was associate professor of IT at Massey. If you'd done a few other things over here, I did some contract work for Software Education Associates. I've been a subject matter expert for Open Polytechnic. I've written several books on computing, mostly different types of programming, about 200 papers. And at the moment, I feel like I don't know anything about the software systems because everything's changed so much. So, I kind of wonder how much of this experience is really helping me now. But I guess it gives me perspectives on what's happening now that are quite useful. But I've been at Academy EX for 11 years. And I've delivered this course since 2022, but we've completely redesigned it for the age of AI. So I'm going to pass over now to my colleague, Roy Davis, who's going to introduce himself. Roy.
Hmm. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name's Dr. Davies. No, I've been in and out of academia. I started computer science, gosh, in the days when the Mac Classic was considered to be quite a good computer. And even then, I knew that what I really enjoyed doing was writing code, programming things. I was definitely a bit of a geek, a bit of a nerd, you know. But I was also really interested in the human side. I remember when we were being taught in computer science about user interface. At that time, it was if you've got a flashing cursor, make sure you put a prompt because so people know what to type, and that was pretty much user experience 101 for us. Then I went off to Sweden and did a PhD in the virtual reality and calm computing, which when you think that this was in early 2000s and you consider what the virtual reality technology might have been in those days, it was quite ambitious to say the least. Been working, well, ever since my master's really in emerging technologies. I mean, for my master's, I built robots for wheelchairs. I've been working with AI, mixed reality, assistive technologies, IoT. On my desk behind me over there, there's all sorts of weird and wonderful devices I'm making at the moment for sensors and stuff that goes on bridges to measure water height and a bunch of interesting things like that. I was at the University of Auckland, then University of Lund in Sweden. I helped co-found a virtuality research center in Sweden, the biggest at the time, with a huge virtuality thing called a cave, which is a truly astounding device, costs millions of crowns, and pretty much does the same as a Oculus Quest today. Um, I'm also co-founder of a few companies. I haven't written anywhere near as many papers as David. I've been more on the business side of things, I suppose. And that little picture down the bottom there, that's, I guess, the first technology that I remember when I was very, very young. I grew up on an island called Sark between England and France. And that was our Facebook and messaging system all in one. You know, you could talk to the operator, she knew what was going on and could connect you to the right people, even if they weren't where they're supposed to be.
Cool, thanks, Roy. We're going to kind of vibe present tonight in the spirit of vibe coding, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. We've got some slides. I will say something. Roy may say something. If any of you want to say anything or
Mm.
put anything in the chat or ask a question, whatever, please feel free to do so. Don't wait till the end. I mean, we will do a bit of Q&A at the end, but if there's anything you want to pick up as we go, please do that. That would be great, rather than, you know, awkward silence. So. You're very welcome to interrupt us. Um, so let's start with the traditional cycle of software development, which has been around for quite a long time now.
Mm.
And in a sense, it still underpins everything that we do, because we're the first thing that we do is, find out, like, what's the system for, who's it for, what do they want.
Mm.
So, we have to sort of come up with an idea and then see whether we can capture what people want from it. And of course, that doesn't change at all. Um, and then there's the difference between analysis and design, which is a big one. I often use the analogy of time travel. It's very, very easy to analyze a set of requirements for time travel. It's not quite so easy to design a solution. So there's a big step into that. Okay, I've got these things I want to happen. How
Mm.
how might they happen? And then there's the building part. And of course, at the moment, because of vibe coding, that tends to be very much the emphasis, but it's only one part of a large and complicated process. So you build something, you've got to make sure it's correct. Does it work as expected? Quite a challenge with AI for sure. And then actually get it out there. I mean, in a sense, anyone can write an app, but how do you deliver it to the people that need it? And then keep it going, and adapting it and making sure that it continues to meet the needs of its stakeholders until it eventually reaches its end of life, which may be a very long time. I mean, Microsoft Word, for example, has been around for a very, very long time and is still going. So we are going to talk about all of the things that are changing around this, but at the heart of it, these kind of core things remain.
I remember in some of our commercial work, the difference between an idea that you can probably knock off in a couple of hours and an idea that's going to take like 3 weeks to implement is often just a couple of sentences difference. Very sort of easy to describe, but often very hard to fix. And this is what I call analyzing for gotchas, because sometimes you have to look at what the idea is and you think, I can see what you mean, but I can't see how you're going to get from A to B. And that is often what trips people up the most.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Roy. Um, so of course, what's happening at the moment is that AI is everywhere, you all know, you've seen it everywhere. And so when we talk about AI in software development, we tend to talk about the coding bit most. But I know the things on the slides are quite small. I just sort of wanted to capture the idea that all of these different steps, there's an AI for that. Well, there's an AI for everything. Um, but when we think about that life cycle, it isn't just, oh, we do the normal things and we code something with an AI and then we go back and we do the normal things again. Everything that we do is now being transformed in different ways. Um, I'm not going to go through any of the sort of particular details of what's under those sections, but I think it's important to think about the fact that when we go to those early stages, when we're interacting with people and we're gathering that information, AI can be very, very helpful with that. It can help us to bring together all sorts of different data sources and analyze them and summarize them and bring out the key things. And I think one of the really cool things about AI is that, an LLM, never mind a coding tool, can be extremely useful in the process of putting together something that'll become an application.
Mm. And, and even tools for creating the mock-ups and the graphical user interfaces and so on, also very powerful. Mm.
So yeah, we'll dig into some of this as we go through. I think one of the things that as an interesting, it's become a fairly common term, is the idea that we kind of collapse the stack. And if those of you who might be familiar with kind of how software tends to be architected, is that it's got all these different layers that have, over the years have become quite established. So the thing on the right there is, a typical sort of representation of what that might look like. Um, and the sort of machine layers are like you've got the business layer that kind of does the thing you want. You've got the application layer, you've got the data layer, the technology layer, you've got security and so on. And there's this sort of term that's become fairly well used, which is collapsing the stack, where that whole sort of idea that you've got all these separate things and they're kind of separate concerns and you wire them together. So, your databases have a particular role, your business logic has another role, and then the thing that people see when they're using it has another role. And typically, and we'll talk about the sort of what the sort of job roles in computing, they've typically been a little bit siloed. So people have become specialized. But AI is kind of making us rethink that, and it's integrating all of these layers into sort of one giant process. And I think what's happened with even the coding side of it just over the last year or so is that we've become more and more treating it as a giant blob rather than coding things in separate units. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, there's definitely an evolution of the way we think about that overall architecture.
Just add a slight comment there, and I'm doing a lot of coding at the moment, and if you do try and throw too much at it at once, it tends to choke on it, and um, so you do actually have to split things out, and you do have to simplify things into these different layers. You can't just sort of say make a and it will do it, unless it's a really simple thing.
Yes, I've been working with something that I wanted to use at work, and I sort of challenged the AI to do something quite complicated with a set of data, and it wasn't long before I realized that actually I should just sort the data out because the AI was, just not really capable of sorting it out itself.
Mm,
So yeah, getting those perspectives is, I think, one of the useful things about getting into this sort of AI coding is learning what it can or can't do.
mm.
And we'll talk about the course that we're offering towards the end, but some of the ways in which we might be integrating these activities into that. I'm not sure how well this one fitted in, but this is a classic marketing slide, which I got off a website, and it's how software development's transforming the life cycle. And if you look underneath the arrows, I mean, they're the same kind of context that we've touched on in the other diagram, but the words underneath are sort of marketing waffle. But I think the reason it's worth sort of engaging with some of this is that it kind of feels sometimes as if, AI is a magic bullet. And so, all we have to do is, use AI to do all of our development and, just have a completely AI enabled agent workflow that does everything. And so, there are some sort of words in there like turning code into a continuous learning system and self-healing as a feature. I mean, these are great aspirations,
Mm.
but I think one of the key things that we want to probably address as we go through the course is, all of these things have what Roy called gotchas just now, which is, it's not as simple as that. And it can do amazing things, but it can also do terrible things. And we'll maybe try and pick some of those apart as we go
Yeah.
through our conversations.
And I mean, just on that, one of the most recently, just helping a guy who had this really great idea for an app, put it together, got so far, and then just really got stuck because he didn't really know what he didn't know. And they're helping him as an IT person, just pointing out, okay, this is how you need to organize things. This is what you need to tell the AI to do. Was a huge benefit to him.
Cool. A little bit later, when we get round to the sort of the talking about vibe coding a bit, I'll maybe find out if any of you have had any experiences with it, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. Um, so the other thing that's happening, of course, is everything's happening more quickly. So in the past, let's say you wanted to develop a sort of proper website. So, not something that's just a bit of WordPress, but a real application. It could take quite a long time and cost quite a lot of money. And there'd be all kinds of things that had to happen. You bring on the client and then you spend ages in design, doing sort of wireframes, either manually or sort of partially tool supported, lots of different types of mock-ups, which could take quite a long time, even with software. Um, and then there'd be a whole long time of actual development, looking for that missing semicolon and so on that coding was often all about. And then all of that kind of other stuff that had to go on, branding, content development, lots and lots and lots of things. Um, but AI compresses a lot of those, not just the coding, but throughout the whole process. So things become much quicker. And one of the big problems in a way, of the tools is that that they're really quick, and we have to completely rethink the way that we used to manage the life cycle, or manage a development team, or just manage all of the interactions between the different tools. So, when development was slow, there was time to reflect and there was time to really know what was going on. And when development takes place in like minutes, and a tool is generating something pretty big in a very short period of time, it really puts the pressure back on humans to know what the heck's going on, and try and keep on control of that. So that compression, of course, is very helpful, but it's also a big challenge for the way that we manage the software development process.
Mm. Nothing to add
Yeah.
on that one.
Okay. I paused dramatically, but nothing happened. So I'll move on. So back in the day, and back in the day, I mean like 18 months ago, if you worked in software development, you probably had a bit of a specialization. And there's a hideous AI generated picture on the slide, about the sorts of things that some people might have specialized in. And AI development is one of them, but there are lots and lots of other things. But typically there was this idea that, if you were a professional developer, you were quite often someone who had a specialized skill set.
Mm.
Um, but that's kind of beginning to disappear, and I think this is definitely something that Roy will speak to. Uh,
Well, I definitely will because I was
yeah.
looking at that diagram and thinking, well, I've actually specialized in all of those. Everything from virtuality systems to IoT devices, AI development, full stack development. The number of computer languages I've learned over the years is in the tens at least, and there's not that many computer languages out there really. But one thing I would say though, and this is where people make the mistake, I guess, with vibe coding, is that you still need to understand the structures. You still need to understand that, there are things called a front end, a back end, databases, how they all connect together. You need to understand what the cloud is, how you manage things in the cloud, even if it's just to tell the AI to do this thing for you. You need to understand, you need to ask it to do things like we need to run a security test on this code. Um, so a lot of the focus has changed away from the doing as such. I used to have to sort of, if I was writing something, it would be figuring out what it needs to be done, and then the actual coding would be learning the APIs, building the APIs, perhaps learning the different libraries, putting it all together. That bit would take, a week or two or three, depending on how complex it was. Now that bit is really short, but everything else still has to be done. And we're seeing the best vibe coders are those who understand the complexities of the system still. The AI is good, but it's not at the point where you can just let it loose.
Not yet.
Well, yes, but
Yes. Yes. I'm not sure any of us know at what point we won't have to be careful.
yes.
But I guess the big problem, of course, with generative AI is that its very architecture
Mm.
means that it will do random things.
Mm.
And I sometimes find it very weird that, our civilization is beginning to rely on something that's basically like a slot machine. You've got no idea what's going to come out. So it's quite worrying in some ways, but understanding that it's a slot machine is important when you're coding with it because we're not
Mm,
used to coding being a probabilistic enterprise. It's meant to be a
mm,
deterministic thing. So you know exactly what you want and you code it and you get exactly that. And it's very unforgiving. It's either
mm,
right or it's wrong. Whereas with, when we move into the AI space, there's that randomness, which is quite, I think, can be quite disturbing when you
mm,
want things to be deterministic, and they're most certainly not. So, yes,
mm.
it's a whole new world for sure.
Especially when it starts doing things, I suppose, in some ways the standard way, but you actually had an idea of doing it somewhat differently. Um, because it'll choose what is known out there because it's bringing
Mm.
information from everywhere. And if you want to do things a little bit differently, you come back after it's been chewing away at the problem for a while and realize it's gone down that path that you told it not to go down.
Yeah, yeah, and like everything else, with AI, of course, it's reading from a data set which is by no means perfect. So,
Indeed.
you go to an LLM, it's read all this junk off the internet. You use a coding tool, and it's read all this junk out of GitHub.
Mm,
From
mm,
rubbish software that's been written in the past. So yeah, these are all important things to be aware of. I guess this is the big picture. This is the interesting journey that we've been going on over the last, oh, I was going to say 50 years. It's more than that now. We've had
mm,
computers since the 1940s, and when they began, they were running just machine code, which is
mm,
binary instructions. And of course, underneath the covers, that's all computers do now. They only work in binary just because
mm,
it's so much easier to build things that work in binary than try and work in a different number system. Um, and then, that's really hard. Sort of, writing programs with numbers, sort of thing people were doing in Bletchley Park in the Second World War. We don't really want to be doing that. And so, I mean, there's no point going through all of these in a lot of detail, but gradually what we've done is go a little bit further away from what's really going on underneath.
mm,
So, different sorts of languages, assembly, third generation languages, and so on, and then sort of larger units of things. So libraries of code that we could reuse, um, tools that sort of help you build a layer without having to sort of hand code everything. Um,
mm,
Build tools like integrated development environments, IDEs that take away some of the grunt work of coding. So, those sorts of tools have had, generate me a sort of template or, code completion type things for quite a long time now. Um, and sort of delegating off to cloud services and APIs, so programming interfaces where there's a service and you just call it. You don't have to write it. You just go and ask it to do what you want it to do. All of those things. And then 2 or 3 years ago, there was a lot of people talking about no code and low code, which again were just tools that mostly were drag and drop, and you didn't have to write very much code. And then in the AI space, last time I ran this particular course, which was a couple of years ago, the AI was the sort of code assistant generation, whereby you were kind of managing it overall, but you could say to an AI, "I'll write me a piece of code that does this, and then I'll plug it into the stiffer stuff I've already got." And that's really old hat now. So we still do that sometimes, but we're much more now in the space where, in theory, at least, well, in practice, in some ways, you can just make it so, and it will generate you an application.
mm,
So, in a sense, it feels kind of quite revolutionary to have AI coding tools, but actually, it's not really. It's the continuation of a journey that we've been on for many decades.
mm. If you think of all the languages that have existed all the way from assembly code to what we have today, that they're really just a way for computers or for us to be able to think abstract enough in a language that we can understand, and then have that converted into something that the computer can understand. Because David says eventually everything's machine code. And really AI coding is just the latest generation of that. It's the latest form of programming language, really.
I just spent the last sort of 30 seconds trying to find my spelling mistake, which is staring at me from the top of the thing. Yeah, I do hand roll all my slides at the moment because I tried using Gamma and stuff like that, but they've got no idea what it's like to read a slide, if you
Hmm.
know what I mean. So, I find AI slide sets, they all have horrible font sizes laid out
Hmm.
in unnecessary boxes. And so, yeah, at the moment I still use the basic, really, really simple Academy EX template. As you can see, I have been messing around with um, ChatGPT's image creator just because I'm curious about at what point it will stop looking like it was generated by an AI. I'm not quite sure we'll ever get to that point, but at least it's okay now. It does words. So
Yes.
that's a big improvement, isn't it? Doing words. And I have to say, I'm slightly off topic, but things that I'm really impressed about with um, ChatGPT image now is that you can copy a diagram, an image exactly, and then ask it to edit it, and it does it properly, which I think is a huge step forward. So that's really helpful. And colorizing black and white photos, it's amazingly good at that.
Hmm.
So yeah, and who knows where these things will go. Anyway, slightly off topic, but it's really yes, but there's always that sort of thing about, when do I do it myself and when do I use AI for it? And I think it's always an
Hmm.
interesting mental conversation to have in your head. And why am I choosing to do this with AI, or why am I choosing this to do this myself? Um, okay. So yes, well, I suppose this is the big thing, isn't it? Like, all of this talk about AI, and the one thing that comes up most, I suppose, in the software space is what is vibe coding? What does it mean? So I've copied this tweet that is quite famous now, which is Andre Karpathy's tweet, which was that it wasn't that people hadn't been doing AI coding in this style before. Um, but it was the fact that he was the first one to say, I've just been letting it do its thing. So, like prior to this, most people who were using AI for coding were, kind of using AI to code something and then like checking it,
Hmm.
and like doing some coding themselves. And so Karpathy just said, well, let's just do it. So he came up with this term vibe coding. What's really interesting, I think, about this is the way that he approaches it, that thing in the middle there, he says, I'm too lazy to find it. Like, I ask for the dumbest things just because I'm too lazy. And then I don't even check. I just like accept all the things. And if I get an error message, I just pass it back to the AI and say, fix it. Um, and the code goes beyond my usual comprehension. So this was kind of a tipping point that kind of said, you can do this. Now, back in the beginning of 2025, the key sentence was probably, it's not too bad for throwaway weekend projects, but still quite amusing. It's not really coding. I just see stuff, say stuff, run stuff, copy paste. It mostly works. Um, and so the idea at the beginning really was, that vibe coding was, it's kind of rubbish. It's kind of fun, but, you wouldn't really do it. You wouldn't do this for anything real. Um, but 18
Hmm.
months later, uh, I think that what's happened is that the term vibe coding has now got a different meaning. Vibe coding now means coding with an AI in a way. So it's
Hmm.
got a much broader definition than I'll make something Mickey Mouse. I won't really check it. I'll just, make a bit of a throwaway thing. Um, and so we're all kind of on a journey where the term vibe coding has come to mean something a little bit more industrial strength, although a lot of people make that distinction that, this vibe coding goes up to a point and then you have to do something else. What are your thoughts, Roy?
Well, I have to say that as somebody who, really loves coding, I mean, I used to be really upset when I'd be talking to my clients and I'd say, look at this wonderful turn of phrase and design in my comments and how well I've structured the code, and there'd be absolutely no interest whatsoever. Um, to where at the moment I can experience that joy, I suppose, of rapid production of code, vibe coding, because the turnaround time is so fast. You can try something. Oh, that didn't really work. Okay, let's try that. And what I'm doing, one of the big projects I'm doing at the moment is I'm actually writing an entire new operating system for wearable devices and IoT devices, and I'm doing it mostly vibe coding, but I am checking as well. And surprisingly enough, if I keep it well focused, it is actually working rather well. I'm actually able to write code for hardware devices that runs, that read sensors, that sends stuff out over mesh networks, builds new kinds of mesh networks, and all sorts of things like that. And I haven't really had to write a line of code. So if I compare that to the first time that I really tried AI coding, I got it to solve a problem. When I looked at the code and said, well, that's not going to work even. You need to do this. And it gave me a different version of the code, and that didn't work either. And then I said, no, that's not going to work. So it just gave me the first one back again, and it kept flip-flopping between the two. It's worlds apart now. It's every time they do an update, it just makes a whole lot of difference. However, you do need reasonably deep pockets, I might add. But anyway, we'll come to that.
Yes. Um, this now that we've sort of got to the here's vibe coding slide, we'll talk more about the tools, but I wondered if anybody would like to share any of their own experiences, if you've got any of working with AI coding. I'm sure Andy has, but he might not want to say anything. But if anybody's got any experience to share, it would be really nice to hear it. Or you can pop something in the chat if you'd rather.
Yeah, I do have one thing to share. I did relate to what Roy was sharing in terms of you still need to know like the terms, the tech terms, the back end, the front end, because I'm not a tech person, right? And then just building things through vibe coding type of thing, it gets me like frustrated sometimes because I kind of
Mm,
started well, but then it doesn't end well because it doesn't really do what I really want because I don't know where to, fit things in. So yeah, then I get frustrated. I give up. It's like, yeah, never mind. So I do relate to what you said, and it do
mm.
need to have at least a good understanding of, yeah, where they fit in, right, and how they come together. So
Yes, yes. Although, interestingly enough, I've been working with somebody, and most of our comments to this person about their vibe coding is, well, have you asked the AI what the solution might be to your problem? And surprisingly, quite often, I'd say 8 times out of 10, it actually comes up with a pretty good answer. So,
Can I just add to that? My background's actually software engineering, but I'm a sort of a senior board member now in companies, so I don't tend to get on the tools, obviously, but I am going to dabble back in. But I was at a really interesting web sort of agentic session the other day where a bunch of CTOs were kind of sharing their insights as they've brought their engineering teams towards, AI-enabled delivery and development. And interestingly, one team they put together a one squad while it had a couple of engineers who were experienced, it had a person who was a product person who's never coded in their life.
mm,
And she did a really excellent job of creating great production code because she just asked the AI to help her. She said, I don't
mm,
really know a lot about how to create let's say, a website. Tell me the things I should worry about. And then obviously it should list things like different layers, security, etc. And then it educates you, even being largely uneducated in how to code well. So I think it can kind of go both ways, depending on the sort of questions you ask it and the kind of curiosity you bring to a new task that you're kind of new to.
Hmm,
yeah, totally
cool.
agree on that. Yes, totally.
Yes, sometimes being a programmer gets in the way
Mm,
because you're not thinking about the problem, you're thinking too much about the solution. Yeah.
yeah. How to phrase things, though, is also very important. How to know what questions to ask. Um, yeah.
I'd be really interested to know actually. I mean, because of the audience you've had for the course in the past has always been quite diverse. Oh, if you wouldn't mind just putting what you do, I don't mean your actual like job, but like your general role in the chat. I'd just be kind of interested to know, what it is you do and how that might be sort of software adjacent. Of course, this is really awkward if everybody who's gone off to make a cup of tea, but at least there's some of us, hopefully, who can put something in the chat. I'd be really interested to get a bit of a feel for the range of sort of specializations or roles or whatever it is, however you want
Mm,
to express it. Okay, so we've got a business information systems student, a teacher, data and analytics, engagement. Oh, that's Geraldo. Thought I recognised that title. hopefully we'll get a few more. But I mean, even with the ones we've got so far, there's quite a good range. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Just
Alpha two
just
color
just while
blue.
that comes in, I thought I would add that one of my colleagues who's a bridge designer, he actually used Copilot to help him understand how to vibe code. So I actually
Hmm.
gave him an instruction manual and a crash course in vibe coding so that he
Hmm.
actually got some of those parameters of reference in order to
Hmm.
help him then basically set it up. And he did some really, really cool stuff on synthesizing huge amounts of information, but actually just used the coding to basically create Python codes that he could then use to synthesize the information and then do the analysis and then obviously do a
Hmm.
human check at the end. So yeah, it definitely, I think it helps in terms of syntax and understanding, and I've run into problems myself because I'm not a software developer, but it is interesting if you get creative, how much it
Hmm.
can actually help you learn and grow as well.
So did you say he was
Cool.
a bridge
He's a
designer, did you say?
bridge designer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
so glad you said that he had the human checking at the end. I just
Yeah. Yeah. Don't drive on this bridge. No jokes. All fine.
Cool. It's great to see that range. In fact, I find it quite reassuring because we're not trying to talk to software developers who probably already know what they're doing, but there's a lot of people out there who are interested in what goes on in software because it influences their role in different ways, and so it's really nice to see, as we've had before, this huge spread of different professions and ideas and things. So thank you for that. That's really helpful.
I
Um,
think because
Sorry,
the
go
other
on.
thing I'm seeing a lot out there is also is that people who've just got this idea who've never really been able to take it any further because it would have needed finding somebody who could develop it for them, can now just give it a go. And maybe half the time they actually will be successful with that, or maybe more these days. And so, I guess you could say there's positive and negative to that. There's probably going to be a whole lot of um, yeah, I would say perhaps not the most useful apps in the app stores, but nevertheless, people are really able to give it a chance, and some of those may well become something quite new that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity, isn't it, in a way? Because this isn't the end of software development or software
No.
developers. What it means is that there's going to be a lot more software because more people can do the small things that were never worth doing before. I
Mm.
mean, that's the big difference, isn't it? You can now create stuff that was either too hard or was too trivial to spend the time and money on.
Mm. Or you just didn't see the pathway because I don't know, you're running your life and you don't really have the time or the money to do this thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
I think one of the things that I do also see though, which is one of the software engineers like myself would be enjoy being the gatekeeper, I suppose, sometimes, though, and I guess that gatekeeping is being taken away. So,
Yes.
interesting point.
Yes. Okay, right. Let's move on. So I've been listening to this book on the bus. And it's fascinating because it's moving from vibe coding to, as it says, like production grade software. So it is that it's taking that journey. But the reason I stuck it on the screen was that they talk about FAFO in it. And I didn't, I thought when I heard it in the audio book, because I couldn't see that it was two A's, that they were using the more common FAFO acronym. Um, but they weren't. So it's this one, fast. So when you use AI tools, you can do things much more quickly. Ambitious, you can do things that you could never have done before, so whichever wherever you are, you can go higher. Autonomous, so you can do things now on your own with a tool that you in the past you would have had to have done that with other people, with a team. It's fun, well, up to the point, then it gets really, really annoying, but it is it is fun. And the optionality is this thing where you don't have to make those decisions about an application as early as you used to, because you can build something and throw it away and then build something else, or you can build several things at the same time and compare and contrast. And so it gives you all of these different options about how you build things. So yeah, it's a useful acronym, I think, because it captures all of those things that vibe coding brings to the general space of developing software. Well, this isn't me. This is Roy. So over to Roy.
So, one of my first experiences of vibe coding was to uh, basically do what it said in that quote before, which is let's just see what I can do without actually writing any, not even looking at the code. I wasn't going to look at the code at all. And because one of the biggest issues in the area of virtual reality technologies, which is an area I've been working with for decades, is that the tools to create virtual reality experiences are complex. You know, you need to know what you're doing, and it can be quite hard to do. They're very powerful tools, but for your average person who wants to create a visual experience for somebody, for their class, for example, it's really beyond what is possible. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can create a virtuality experience just using Claude Code. And I created this infinite procedurally generated forest. It's got all these features in it, like it's got real world day-night cycles. So when you go in there, it finds your location, it sets the sun at the right place in the sky. It's got clouds, you can have weather effects, rain. If you go up high, you get snow falling, or if you go down low, you get thunderclouds and things like that. There's birds, there's at night time if the sky is clear, you can look up and you can actually see the real stars in the right places. And one of the interesting things I found with this project was once I got started in it, it was very easy to say, oh, I wonder if I could. Oh, birds. We need birds. Yeah, definitely. We need birds. And then it was like, oh, the stars in the skies don't look really that realistic. You know, they need to twinkle a bit. And actually, it'd be really good if they're real stars, you know, the real pattern of stars. And each one of those things would be like a couple of sentences of writing, go away, have a coffee, come back, and see what it had produced. And it was kind of really amazing sort of process of typing some stuff in, throw on the VR headset, have a wander around for a bit, look around, check some things, take off the VR headset, go back into the code cycle again, or rather the Claude again. Even things like the houses there, everything is procedurally generated, all the sounds are procedurally generated from the AI. The only thing that the AI did not create was the sound of the morepork because I figure nighttime you've got to have morepork. It's New Zealand, right? You know, that's just what we think of as morepork. Sorry, as nighttime. Um, you can try it yourself. There's what I did is I actually did it because I work at the University of Auckland as well. I did it as an exercise for students, so you can go into the GitHub page that's listed there. You can actually click on it. I wouldn't do it right now, but you can click on it. You can go on there. If you do it inside a VR headset, you can go into 360 VR and wander around in this infinite forest. There's these little orbs that you can collect. And it was just a whole lot of fun. It was 10 days plus a few others of just unbridled fun, to be honest. And this is one of the things with vibe coding I think that is really cool. However, I should say there were things where I did have to understand how virtuality works. I had to understand things like what a shader is. I had to give it hints on how to do things because it was trying to solve problems in ways that weren't necessarily working. And occasionally I'd have to pull it back and say, okay, this is what you need to do. Look here, here's how it's typically done. Um, you may still find a few rivers that run uphill, but mostly it's pretty good. You've got even things like if you go up into the snow, you then go into skiing mode and you can go real fast, and it's a whole lot of fun. There you go. I could talk
Cool.
about this for hours, but okay, yeah.
Yes, and of course, if you sign up for the course, then it gives an opportunity to try a few things out for yourself. Either
Absolutely.
either professional stuff or just something wacky and fun
Others.
like Roy's created. Um, there is a bit of a vibe coding workflow, which is quite it's I think the important thing is vibe coding is not I go in and I say make me an app that does X because it
Mhm.
will, but it'll be terrible. So there's a kind of a planning process that you need to go through. And one of the recommendations is that you actually use AI to help you plan. So, like a general LLM, you can say, okay, here's what I think I want. This is
Mhm.
kind of what I want to make with a vibe coding tool. Can you help me make a plan? And so, it can help, it'll generate a sort of draft plan. You can then work with the plan because it's so much easier just working with a written plan than it is to like put something into a vibe coding tool and it's completely wrong. And then you're kind of unravel this mess that it's got itself into. So it's quite important to think about that planning phase. And of course, you're coming back to where we started, which is we've got that, that whole sort of life cycle, the whole thing about grabbing those requirements, because requirements effectively become prompts. And the better the requirements, the better the system will be. If you're writing it, a little Mickey Mouse app for yourself and you're the client, then, your sort of analysis team is the AI. So they can really help you. And it's in the same space as what Roy was saying and others were saying about the fact that, AI can help you do the things that you want to do with AI. It becomes a bit of a cycle. I mean, AI knows, I guess, and that's the wrong word, I know, how to write stuff that AI likes. It's bland as, but it's kind of the right sort of set of tokens to work with the AI. So build a plan, use AI, and then when you've got a decent plan, you make an app. Then, of course, you have to go in this very long test and debug session, and you might find that, it's not doing what you want, but it's easy to go back and do it again. You can revise your plan based on the experience of the horrible prototype you built, and build a better one. So that's really helpful. So that sort of iterative process, um, the loop becomes much smaller than it used to be about the whole sort of analysis, design, build, test, all that stuff. You can now do that in a very fast loop. I think Roy's got a few notes at the bottom that maybe you want to talk through.
One of the things that I found is well, two things, I suppose. The first is that if you more for your own sake, it really helps to have the AI visualize what it is that you want it to do, because otherwise, you're kind of in the dark as to what it's actually planning, as it were. So it's really important that it presents things in a way that you can see what is going on, you can understand what it is planning to do, and you can understand how it's planning to test these ideas. When I work with any AI system, I have a script that I give it, which teaches it about the process of what is called conjecture and refutation. In other words, all ideas need to be tested before they can be accepted as valid, if you like. Regardless of all that, if it does start to bog down, sometimes the quickest thing is to say, right, we're going to chuck that code, we're going to start again. And I've done that a few times in different projects, where we've got the specifications. You spend a lot of time writing those specifications, doing the designs. You get that as good as you can get it with the help of AI. And then once you've got that, then creating the code can be reasonably straightforward. But even then, sometimes you get that. I mean, in before AI times, we would say you code yourself into a corner. Well, AI can do that as well. But the advantage now is that you can say, that's just not working. Okay, we need to think of something else. And you can just throw it away. You don't have that sort of no, emotional baggage. I've spent 3 weeks on this code and I'm buggered if I'm going to throw it away because, so that's a good thing with AI.
Cool. I'm looking at how many slides we've got left. I'll have to run through them fairly quickly because I don't want
Right.
to keep you too long. One of the things that's worth thinking about is which tools might be worth using, and this is just a sort of representative set. I chose Lovable because we had someone come and do a session at Academy EX on Lovable the other day. A very, very simple sort of web builder. And they're still very popular, but there's a little bit of a move away from them to other things. Replit's quite cool because it was originally built for students to code with, and now they've got a really powerful AI level. So that's quite a nice tool. And then, of course, all real developers are all using pretty much Claude Code at the moment, where that's got all those things that you have to do to make something really viable in the real world. So, I mean, of course, you can deploy a Lovable app because they're just websites. But if you're doing something more challenging, then something like Claude Code is where you're going. I think we'll probably end up, our recommended tool for this course might be Gemini, the Google AI Studio, which runs Gemini, but simply because it gives you enough credits to not only build apps, but build apps that also run AI at runtime, which is quite tricky because some of the other tools they can do it, but you might have to pay. So of course we're always in the what's for free space here. So things might change, but that's kind of my thinking at the moment. But there's lots of great tools around that do this. Um, I'll pass over to Roy for a very quick run through what is an agent, because everybody talks about agents these days, but they all mean different things. So we'll find out
Yeah.
what Roy thinks it is.
Well, very quickly, I mean, digital agents been around for a long time, but inside Linux systems, they're called daemons, and they basically are just software that runs without necessarily a user interacting with it. Within the AI space, it's essentially the same thing, except it's an AI behind the scenes, but it's running off, going and doing stuff without you necessarily watching what it's doing. And when you close your laptop lid, it's still doing it. So it's running on a server somewhere, and this OpenClaw, yeah, OpenClaw was one example of that that became very popular. But all the AI tools these days offer an agentic version, which basically just means AI that runs when you're not looking at it. That's putting it very simply.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Roy. I mean, I think a lot of people think that, you know, because of the hype, it's all about, oh, agents is all about having all of these different agents. They're all going off and doing all sorts of things at once. But of course,
Mm,
it doesn't necessarily
mm,
mean that. It can just mean you've got one agent that, as Roy
mm,
says, is getting on with work
mm,
over a period of time. I just put this screen grab on just as a bit of an example of agentic coding with Claude Code, because one of the things that it's quite good at is it's got a plan mode. I sort of pointed out at the bottom there, it says Claude's plan. So that whole thing about using AI for planning, it's got this really nice setting where you can get it to walk through a plan and kind of see what would happen if it were to do that thing. And so rather than being at the mercy of, okay, I'm going to edit this plan and then I'm going to build something, Claude's got this kind of next step, which is, okay, I'm going to help you do a real meaningful plan and see what would work and what wouldn't. And I might try a couple of things out while I'm planning to get you to that point. So I think it's really interesting. I was trying to automate a job that I do at work, which is really boring, and it did actually work for me. Apart from the fact I wasn't allowed to connect Claude Code to our email system, which kind of shot me in the foot a bit. But it did everything else, and it would do everything if I was allowed to connect it to email. But I must admit, I'm a bit wary of that anyway. But yeah, so all of these tools constantly get better, so they all do more and more things. And so by the time we get to December at the end of the course, everything will be different. Very briefly, a couple of slides about process, because we've been talking a lot about the coding bit, but I thought it was important for us to think about, well, if we take a step back, a lot of teams have been using agile or similar processes for development for many years. What does it mean for that? Like, do we have to completely change the way that we approach projects? Um, so the thing about everything being quicker is highlighted on the slide there. Iterations will be measured in minutes and hours, not days or sprints. So in the sense, though, you have a lot more iterations in a sprint, however long your sprint happens to be.
mm,
Um, but what this article sort of tries to stress is that gives us more time to invest in quality. So if we think about something like the Scrum cycle, you've got all those ceremonies, and they're often sort of you've got a short ceremony tacked on the end of a long sprint. If you can get through a lot more iterative stuff more quickly, you might have more time to focus more on quality. So that's one perspective. And I got one more, which is the idea that AI just becomes another team member within your team process. Um, but it kind of frees us up to do more creative things. So, we've had pair programming for many years. And of course, AI can now be your programming partner and doesn't get bored, doesn't get fed up with you, doesn't think you're the most annoying person in the world. It just gets on and sycophantically works with you, and you can, just make it do things over and over again, and it never complains. So there are big advantages to having a pair programming partner that never gets tired or bored or confused. So I think I don't think it's going to undermine the basic principles of the way that we build software in terms of sort of team dynamics and organization. But of course, it is going to make a lot of difference to the mechanics of how that works, and it might be something we can talk about as we go through. Because
Just
we're
had
nearly
one.
at,
Just
sorry,
had one
go on.
little very quick comment on that.
Yes.
It does sometimes though. So my wife uses AI for her project and work, and she's a hydrologist making hydraulic models and things. Sometimes the way the AI comes up with help though can be quite interesting. It says things like, "Was there a reason why you had these parameters swapped on this function call?" Sort of pointing out an error that had been in there since the model was made. So even within AI not being human, it can be quite funny sometimes. And as a pair programmer, it can be quite really helpful though for that kind of stuff. Also really helpful for finding patterns in data and stuff like that. So as David says, give it all the boring tasks and get on with the stuff that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Does it?
because it can fix stuff that you would never find, and it can
Yeah.
find stuff that you lost, and it
Yep.
can make sense of something that you no longer understand.
Yeah.
All of those things that are like really, really hard jobs,
Yes. Yes. Or
that we
do
didn't,
stuff that needs to be done thousands of times.
that nobody wants to do.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to leave myself time, three
Yeah. Oh,
minutes,
yep. Yep.
to very briefly talk about. Well, I suppose the purpose of doing this session was to try and encourage people to sign up for our amazing course on understanding software development processes and tools, which is a 15 credit level 8 micro credential, which was originally designed as a 15-week course 3 or 4 years ago. We redesigned it last year to make it a bit shorter, and the content's been completely revised, really. But the basic bones of it remain. So these are the kind of things that we talk through. I think the main difference between what we used to do and what we do now is that I used to talk about, getting people, teaching people some basic aspects of coding so they could try something out. Well, we don't really need to teach any basic aspects of coding anymore. So what we can try out becomes a lot more ambitious. So I think I think it's great actually. I think it really opens up what you can achieve in 12 weeks hugely over what we used to be able to do. You'll see that there are two assessments. I like to think that they're kind of lightweight and entertaining. The first one is one where you just pick something that's got something to do with software development and present it to everybody else in groups if you like, or if you prefer, you can do it individually. And then the one at the end, in the past, this was always here's a sort of half-baked, half-finished web application. How would you make it better? But of course, now in the age of AI, we can just say, well, build whatever you like, and we'll we can maybe share it with everybody and see what they think. So I like to see the assessments as being just very much part of the learning, but also, something that's really worthwhile doing for yourselves. I've got one more sort of info slide, which is this one. So the reason we chose this time to do this session is that this is when we would run the course. So 5 o'clock on Thursdays. You can see on the right, the course starts on the 17th of September. If you're interested in joining it, you can apply. You go to our website, academyex.com, and then at the top, you'll see one of the links is programs and courses, and then there's a list of micro credentials, and you'll see it listed there. And then there's an apply now button. $450, a bargain, I think, for both me and Roy, sharing our amazing wisdom for many, many long weeks. How much self-directed study? That's a very, very good question. So the funny thing about NZQA accredited courses is that they tell you how many hours you're supposed to put in, and it's insane. So it's 10 hours a credit. So in theory, you would do 150 hours. But in practice, I think that's a little unrealistic. I think, how much self-directed study do you do is entirely up to you. I think what I'd like to think about is people want to spend time on sort of going through the stuff and
Mm.
contributing and all of that kind of stuff. So um do what you can or what you want to, really, because at the end of the day, these things are all about you getting something out of it and putting in as many hours as you feel is appropriate for you to be getting what you want out of the course. But I would hope that, given that we've got these amazing tools, that you'll find yourself spending hours and hours and hours using different AI tools. And I see there's a note there about what environments do you need access to. Yeah. obviously we want to make sure that things are free. And as I said, at the moment, my go-to is Google AI Studio, just because I haven't exhausted my tokens, and I can make things that, you can make an app. I mean, they're cookie cutter apps typically. They are a little bit sort of, oh, you've seen all of these before. But being able to build an AI application for free, I think is quite cool. But of course, if there's something else you want to use or something you already have access to, use whatever. We'll also introduce some other little tools around that you can use in the software development process as well as coding. That, again, we're trying to find sort of free things that are interesting and kind of show what's possible. But yeah, that's basically it. Any other questions?
Yeah, kia ora, David.
Sure.
I've just got a question. So I'm a teacher, have no idea about coding, but have been using Claude.
Mm,
And so I've started a project and so could I use that project within the course?
absolutely. I mean, to me, I think that the purpose of micro credentials is they're a bit different to sort of traditional academic courses. They're meant to be something that helps you do something useful. Um, and a lot of them are seen as being very like hands-on vocational in a way. They're about doing a thing. And
Mm,
so from my perspective, what I want people to do if they come on the course is do what they want to do with software, whatever that is. And if it's something you're already doing, then
mm,
that's absolutely fine, because I'm hoping that that you can make it better than it
Yeah.
would have been by the interactions that we have, during the course, not just with me and Roy, but with everybody else as well.
And
yeah,
you can pick our brains as well about, get help on where you get stuck as well.
yes, yeah, because
Yeah.
that's what I don't have any knowledge about. So zero knowledge and with the background and
That's
coding. So
okay.
that's
You just need to know what you want these days. If you can express what you want clearly,
mm,
then ultimately that's really the whole
Yeah.
task now, which is, but that's hard. It's
mm,
it's difficult
Mm.
to express yourself clearly in a way that the AI responds in the way that you expect. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah.
And I guess the other thing is in to do with education, and so security is also
Yeah.
quite
yeah,
a issue. So
yes.
and just understanding those sorts of things will be
Mm.
good. Yeah,
Sure,
But
yeah, we have a week on security and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
but
Cool.
I can say that one of the people that I've been working with recently is a sheep shearer who figured out a really good app for managing all the other shearers' times and things like that.
Mm,
Absolutely no coding experience whatsoever. I
yeah.
mean, he was a clever guy, but a sheep shearer.
Mm,
So with a little bit of help, a little bit of direction, he now has a viable app that's earning him a side income.
yeah.
So
Nice.
there
Good.
you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, really interested. Yeah.
And he still doesn't know how to code because he doesn't need to.
No.
I'm conscious it's gone past 6, so we'll wrap it up now. And thanks for your comments in the
Hmm.
chat, particularly those who are keen to enroll. That would be fantastic. So I look forward to seeing at least some of you on September the 17th. But I will close us off with our karakia. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia waitia aitiara, kia turaki whakata ai, kia turaki whakata ai. Homie
Yay,
huie,
yay,
sa
hi,
Bye.
kia.
ikie.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody. Ka kite, thanks very much for coming, and I hope
Bye.
I will see some of you soon.
Kakite. Thanks, team. Appreciate it.
Aki tēnō.